Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the absolute core of JavaScript. I'm talking about the fundamental building blocks, the 7 primitive data types. You can think of these as the basic ingredients, right? They're what you're going to use to build, well, pretty much everything in your code.
So let's kick things off with a question that might seem simple, but it actually gets to the very heart of how programming languages work. How does a computer know the difference between, say, the number 5 and the word 5? How does it know one is for doing math and the other is just text? Well, the answer, the big secret here, is something called data types. I want you to think of them like labels or categories that you stick on to every piece of information. They're what tell JavaScript, hey, this thing over here, that's a number, so you can do math with it. Or, oh, and this is text. You can put it on the screen for someone to read. Okay, so if we have these labels, how do we actually check them? Well, JavaScript has this super handy built-in tool. It's called the type of operator. You can literally just point it at any variable, any piece of data, and it'll tell you exactly what kind of data you're dealing with. It's kind of like having an ingredient inspector for your code.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the essentials, the 2 heavy hitters. These are the data types you're going to be using every single day you write code. We're talking about numbers and strings.
So first up, we've got the number type. And one of the really convenient things about JavaScript is that it doesn't really care if a number is a whole number, what we'd call an integer, or if it has a decimal point. Whether you've got 10 or 3.14, to JavaScript, it's all just a number. Simple.
And look, we can prove it right here. If we take our handy type of operator and ask it about the number 42, what does it say? Yep, it comes back and tells us loud and clear that it's a number. Easy peasy.
String is up next, and honestly, that's just a fancy programmer word for text. Seriously, any sequence of characters. It could be a single letter, your name, or a whole book. The only rule is you gotta wrap it in quotes, single quotes, double quotes, or backticks, so JavaScript knows, aha, this is a string. So this is interesting. Let's talk about combining strings with other stuff. Back in the day, the old way of doing things, if you wanted to mix some text with, say, a number, you had to manually smush them together with plus signs. It works, but you can imagine how quickly this gets super messy and just hard to read, right? But check this out. The modern way is so much better. Instead of regular quotes, we use backticks. This creates something called a template literal, which is a game changer. It lets us embed our variables directly inside the string. You just use that little $ and curly brace syntax. It is way cleaner, way easier to write, and 1,000,000 times easier to read. All right, we've covered the basics. Now let's move on to some types that are a little more abstract. We're going to get into the concepts that help our code make decisions, handle logic, and even, well, the idea of nothingness. So, say hello to the Boolean. This little guy is the absolute foundation of all logic in programming. It's super simple. A Boolean can only ever be one of 2 things, true or false. That's it. Think of it like a light switch. It's either on or it's off. And this simple switch is what gives our programs the power to make decisions. And you don't always have to literally type out true or false. A lot of the time, you get a Boolean as the result of a comparison. So if we ask the computer a question like, hey, is 4 greater than 1? It doesn't answer yes. Instead, it evaluates that question and gives us back the Boolean value, true. Okay, this next one is a classic point of confusion, but it's actually pretty cool. It's how JavaScript deals with the idea of nothing. There are 2 ways. First, there's undefined. This is the default. It's like you've created a box, but you've never put anything inside it. The box exists, but it's empty. Null, however, is different. Null is when you, the programmer, intentionally put a label on the box that says this is empty on purpose. It's an explicit assignment of no value. All right, so we talked about normal numbers, but JavaScript has a couple of, well, let's call them strange numbers. You can think of them as special signals that pop up when your math has gone a little sideways. So let's ask a classic question. What happens when you try to do something that's mathematically impossible? Like what happens when you try to divide by 0? A lot of programming languages would just crash and burr. But JavaScript, it does something a little different. It gives you infinity. Yeah, that's right. It's a special value that represents the mathematical concept of infinity. And it's treated as being bigger than any other number. But here's the really weird part. If you check its type with our type-off operator, JavaScript insists it's still just a number. The other weird value you're going to see is NaN, and that literally just stands for not a number. This is the result you get when you try to do some math that just
Makes no sense. Like, what do you get if you try to divide the word apple by 2? You get NaN.
And this shows us the single most important thing to remember about NaN. It is sticky. It's like a virus for your math. Once an operation results in NaN, any other calculation you try to do with that result will also become NaN. It basically contaminates the whole chain of math, which is actually super useful because it's a big red flag telling you that something went wrong way back at the beginning.
Okay, we're on to our final primitive type. This one is a bit of a newcomer to the JavaScript family, and it was created to solve a very specific but very important problem. It's pretty powerful.
So this is the symbol. It was added in a more modern version of JavaScript, and its whole job is to be a special tool for creating identifiers that are guaranteed to be totally, completely, 100% unique. When you create a symbol, you can be sure that no other value in your entire program will ever be equal to it. And this right here is the absolute key to understanding symbols. Just look at this. Even if you create 2 symbols that have the exact same description, in this case the word idea, they are not the same. They are not equal. Every single time you call that symbol function, it spits out a brand new, one-of-a-kind value. That uniqueness, that's its superpower. So let's do a quick recap. We've just walked through the fundamental atoms of the JavaScript universe: number, string, Boolean, null, undefined, and symbol. Now, you might hear about another one called BigInt. That's just a special type for dealing with ridiculously huge numbers. But these main ones we covered, they're the core primitives. They are the indivisible pieces that literally everything else is built from. And really, that is the absolute best way to think about them. These data types aren't just some boring rules you have to memorize for a test. They're your building blocks. They're your ingredients. They are your Legos. Every single complex app, every cool website, every video game, when you boil it all down, it's just a clever, creative combination of these simple, primitive pieces. And so that leaves us with one final thought. You've now seen the fundamental ingredients, the basic building blocks of the language. So the real question isn't what they are, it's what are you going to build with them? What problems are you going to solve?